I keep coming back to a single unsettling question. Who actually shapes the world we live in? For a long time, this was hardly a puzzle. If you grew up in an earlier era when global politics seemed divided into two colossal camps, the picture felt clear. One side of the planet listened to the United States. The other took its cues from Moscow. Two centers of gravity, two systems defining almost every choice countries made. The simplicity of that structure made it feel predictable, even if it was dangerous. Welcome to Political Plot, where we cut through the noise to reveal the power plays shaping American politics. Today we're diving into how global power is no longer shaped by a single nation, but by overlapping forces in security, economics, and especially the rising digital realm, where tech companies now influence everything from geopolitics to identity. It's a look at who truly runs the world in an age without a clear leader. But if you came of age after that wall of ideology cracked and fell, then the landscape looked very different. The Soviet Union dissolved, leaving Washington on top of a world where it could project its influence almost everywhere. It policed the seas, dominated the big institutions, and set expectations for global behavior by sheer weight of power. For a time, it felt like a one-voice world. Then something shifted, not abruptly, not with a single event, but gradually, like a fault line widening beneath our feet. The United States grew tired of being the planet's referee. It no longer wanted to spend limitless resources guiding global commerce or reinforcing universal values. Meanwhile, other nations were rising. They gained strength, confidence, and the ability to ignore rules they considered inconvenient. Some even began drafting their own. How did this happen? Three major forces pushed us into this moment. First, Russia never fully blended into Western circles, a once formidable empire now shrinking in relevance and bitter about that trajectory. We can debate the reasons all day, but the bitterness is real and it shapes their every move. Second, China entered the structures the US built with the assumption that increasing wealth would make them think and act the way Americans do. It did not. They became stronger while staying true to their own worldview, a reality that unsettles Washington far more than it expected. And third, millions of people across advanced democracies felt abandoned by globalization. Their discontent simmered for years. Eventually, they concluded that their governments no longer represented them, and their faith in leadership eroded. Look at the major geopolitical flashpoints dominating headlines. Most of them in some way trace back to these forces. Together they explain why we now drift through a world with no clear captain, a world without a central conductor. But such moments do not last forever. Nature dislikes a vacuum. So the real question becomes, where are we heading next? What kind of global structure will define the coming decade? If you expect a return to the old patterns, you might be surprised. The future is not pointing toward a world balanced by two giants, nor toward one commanded by a single superpower. It will not neatly fragment into multiple equal power centers either. What we are moving into is a reality with several overlapping orders, each covering different aspects of life, and one of them will profoundly shape our desires, our beliefs, and the boundaries of our freedom. Let's start with the one we already see clearly, the security landscape. Here, the United States still stands far above the rest. It remains the only nation that can send soldiers, ships, and advanced equipment across the entire globe. No other military can match that reach. China is beefing up its forces, especially in Asia, but its influence outside the region is limited. Nervous about Beijing's growth, many Asian countries rely even more heavily on the American security umbrella. In Europe, Russia's assault on Ukraine has reinforced the same pattern. European states tighten their ties with Washington and NATO, counting on American firepower to deter further aggression. The Russian military once inspired concern, but years of losses and suffocating sanctions have degraded its strength. Nuclear weapons still exist, of course, but using them would be suicide, which prevents escalation. For these reasons, the security order we live in remains centered around one dominant force, and it will likely stay that way for years. Beside this military structure sits the global economic system, which functions very differently. Here, power is shared across several players. The United States has a huge economy, but it cannot dictate financial behavior the way it dictates security arrangements. Washington and Beijing depend deeply on each other. Their economic ties are at record levels despite political tension. That interdependence means neither can fully control the other. Many countries want the strategic protection of the United States while also wanting access to China's exploding market, which may soon become the largest on Earth. The European Union, with its unified market, sets influential regulatory standards. India is becoming a more significant economic force. Japan still carries weight. These shifting strengths mean the economic order is not dominated by one or two players. It is a shared, multipolar arena. Tension naturally grows between these two worlds. The United States uses its security leverage to try pulling more economies into its orbit. We already see this in the push to restrict semiconductor technology and in efforts to secure control over critical minerals. On the other side, China tries to turn its commercial strength into diplomatic alliances. Meanwhile, Europe, Japan, India, and others try hard to stop either giant from overwhelming the rest. Most of the time, they manage to maintain that balance. But all of this sets the stage for a third order, one that will matter even more to our daily lives, the digital realm. And unlike the military and economic systems, this one is not controlled by governments. It is controlled by private technology giants. Consider how the war in Ukraine unfolded. Western nations supplied weapons, but tech companies kept Ukraine connected. They protected its networks from cyber attacks. They delivered communication tools that allowed leaders to talk with soldiers at the front. Without those companies, Ukraine might have gone dark within weeks, and its government might not have survived. Or look at politics in the United States. Technology firms determine whether a political figure can broadcast directly to millions of people without any filter. Social platforms amplify conspiracy theories, shape public perception, and in some cases help ignite riots. Without these digital amplifiers, events like the Capitol attack, the unrest in Ottawa, or Brazil's January uprising would have unfolded very differently. These companies also affect something more intimate: identity. Older generations debated nature versus nurture. Now we add a third force, the algorithm. It molds our habits, feeds our biases, and nudges our emotions. If you want to rebel against a system today, questioning authority is not enough. You must question the code that selects what you see and how you think. That is a level of power no government in history ever held. Where this digital order goes depends on what these companies choose to become. If American and Chinese tech firms align closely with their respective governments, we will drift into a technological Cold War, splitting the digital world into two incompatible spheres. If companies fight to remain globally integrated, we may see a new kind of globalization, one defined more by data than by trade routes. And if digital platforms keep expanding while governments lose control, we could enter a future where technology companies become the dominant players in every arena, a world where they set the rules for behavior, information, and opportunity, a technopolar world with consequences that could mean boundless innovation or the disappearance of personal freedom. Normally, this is where someone might offer reassuring news, but there is no pause button on these technologies. They accelerate whether we are ready or not. The tools becoming available are so powerful that a small number of individuals already possess the knowledge to recreate dangerous biological threats. This is not speculation, it is reality, and we cannot pretend otherwise. I do not claim to have the answers, but we absolutely need the people who do hold power to confront critical questions. These companies are not just massive corporations with large profits. Their leaders are not just extraordinarily wealthy individuals. They are becoming, whether intentionally or not, some of the most influential actors on Earth with the ability to shape political outcomes, social stability, and the psychological fabric of entire populations. We need to know if they will govern their creations responsibly. What will they do with the unprecedented data they gather? And maybe the most urgent question of all, will they continue using advertising systems that turn each of us into a product, fueling division and misinformation that fractures entire societies? There was a time, not long ago, when the United States exported democratic ideals. It did so imperfectly, inconsistently, sometimes hypocritically, but it still tried. Today, the country exports technologies that can weaken democracy just as effectively as old institutions once protected it, and the leaders in charge of those technologies must decide whether they are comfortable with that outcome or whether they intend to change the direction we are heading. We deserve those answers, and we need them soon.